जय भारत। वेलकम टू डेफ टॉक्स क्लिप्स बाय आदि अचिंत। जैसे ही आपने मेरे बड़े चैनल जो डेफ टॉक्स बाय आदि है उसको आपने जिस तरह से सपोर्ट करा, उसी तरह से ये हमारे क्लिप्स के चैनल को, जहां पर आपको छोटे छोटे अपडेट्स, छोटे छोटे शॉर्ट्स और छोटी छोटी कहानियां मिलेंगी, इसी को भी सपोर्ट जरूर कीजिएगा। लाइक का बटन जरूर दबाइए, सब्सक्राइब तो ऑब्वियसली करिए, बेल आइकॉन दबाना बिल्कुल मत भूलिएगा। एंड हाँ जी, प्लीज अपने दोस्तों के साथ, फैमिलीज के साथ ये वीडियोस जरूर शेयर करिएगा। एंजॉय करिए ये क्लिप को। जय हिंद।
Civil society has demonstrated this long march very crucially. They've demonstrated that they went to Islamabad to seek a redressal of their grievances, to seek closure. Women, for example, don't know are they widows or are they still married. It is really tragic, the kind of stories when you hear that. So they went and they gave an opportunity to the government to listen to their grievances, to negotiate, to bring closure to this issue, and to seek justice. Volume thodi kam. The government blew it up. The government blew up the opportunity because instead of seizing the opportunity, they ignored them. They treated them brutally. They insulted the women. So civil society has been pushed to the wall. And as Mahrang Bulut said in the last speech, we cannot expect any justice or anything from Islamabad. So what does that mean? That they've been pushed to the wall, and this is what the armed groups have been saying all along, that you cannot expect justice from the government in Islamabad. So civil society, this will be dangerous for Pakistan, that if they now feel that they cannot get justice, where do they go? They will continue to protest, but they are not going to get closure, they're not going to get justice, and this opportunity was blown by the government in Islamabad. Now, elections are going to be held on 8th. So now the Baloch Jagriti Committee is asking the people not to vote. So this is going to be a very interesting dynamic, because there's a fellow called Jamal Raisani, who's one of the death squad members. He was also there, when this camp of the Baloch Jagriti Committee was a National Press Club. So the government, in a very silly propaganda move, asked this guy also to set up their own camp just next to the protest camp of the Baloch Jagriti Committee. Now, Jamal Raisani has been given a ticket, you won't believe it, by the PPP, and he is contesting from Quetta. Now, with what face does the PPP have to show that can they talk about Baloch rights? Likewise, the PMLN. Earlier, Mariam, a couple of months ago, she had worn a Baloch dress and hugged a Baloch girl whose parents or father had gone missing. None of the mainstream parties have said anything about the protests when these guys were in Islamabad.
Yeah.
So they are discredited too. So in a sense, that civil society is going to now, and these were the young people. Some of them were engineers, doctors, old mothers, young children, who are the future, the next generations. As again, to quote Dr. Mahrang Bulut, she said, "We have passed on the flame to the next generation. We have made them aware of what is happening, to the people who have gone missing." And then she said, "The unmarked graves." She said, "These graves are ours. They're the graves of Baloch martyrs. We can never forget them." So, this is what I thought. The government has really blown an opportunity to at least listen to the grievances. Badass to nikal dete. But in their arrogance, the army in its arrogance said, "We don't need to. We can handle these guys." This is a big mistake, because this is how revolutions take place. This is how change happens. When the fear goes and they have nothing left to lose. So this is basically broadly, we can go into details later, but this is broadly what is happening in Balochistan. And then other surprising thing, the number of attacks in the last 4 or 5 days, which are the Baloch armed groups have carried out, I've never seen anything like this before. The only time it happened was once in 2005, when a doctor was raped by an army officer in a Sui gas installation. You see, for the Baloch, just like for the Pashtuns, ill treatment of women, things like rape and all that, are absolutely forbidden. So they react very violently to any incident, just like the Pashtuns. So hundreds of rockets were fired into that sweet gas installation, and it was out of operation for a long time. That was the last time the Baloch reacted so violently.
Yeah.
And now, again, there have been attacks, a series of, you don't know how, I mean, the numbers you can dispute, but there have been attacks widespread all over Balochistan.
Yep.
So this is the other thing that's happened in Balochistan.
So what I see different in this whole gambit which has happened, the armed group and the civil society, as you say, and Mahrang Baloch's evolution, I must say, is quite interesting to me,
Yes.
because she's come out of nowhere to
Yeah.
somewhere
Really
to
a
be,
grassroots leader.
yeah, grassroots. And she's when they came back home, they literally, when they did that rally, I mean, I think Pakistani politicians would be quite, यार इतने सारे लोग कहाँ से आ गए? I mean,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
something that
Jealous
would be,
that they can
yeah,
never get these kind of people.
yeah. So that's something which is quite prominent. But sir, what do you say about their tactic? There are two things that I look at. One, the organization, right? They had their heads together. They knew what they were doing. There were no incidents from their side that the Pakistani army could crack when they went to Islamabad and all that. They didn't do anything. They were quiet. They were peaceful. They were crying. This that very well behaved. Although the repression came from that side, they still stood their ground. Second is their media strategy, sir. They've now reached the corridors of power all over the world. What do you think has changed? What has happened here? It's a very different Baloch movement.
You see, the reason is twofold. One, it's a genuine outpouring of anguish at the loss of their brothers, fathers, and sons, and not knowing what has happened there. It's a genuine feeling. So when you heard her speak, or other the Baloch who were there speaking, there's so much of sincerity and pain and anguish in their voice.
Yeah.
You can almost relate to it. It's unbelievable. So that is one aspect of it, that they didn't have to act, they didn't have to pretend. Everybody had a story to tell. That wall that they had, which had photographs, there was a painful story of each, and hence the spontaneous kind of support that they got from the Baloch and even from the Pashtuns. On the media strategy, I think they realized that it is the world of social media. Just as
Mhm.
Manzoor Pashtun and the PTM realized the same thing, because mainstream media was forbidden from covering them, the Pashtuns. Here in the Baloch, they knew that the mainstream media is not going to carry them. So, social media. But I will say one thing for the mainstream media in Pakistan, like, newspapers like the Dawn, for example, did carry their stories. Then you
Yeah.
had these podcasters who did carry out the interviews. Asatur was one, Hamid Mir was another, who carried their live stories. There were also these other kind of journalists who tried to provoke Dr. Mehrang Baloch by saying, "What do you have to say about the armed groups and this and that?" A few journalists like that, but who were shouted down and booted out very quickly. But so the media strategies now, they realize that it's the social media which links everybody together,
Hmm.
that it goes beyond geography. So whether it's any part of Balochistan or any part of the world, they're able to get that message across instantaneously through X, through Facebook, through Instagram, and the videos are there everywhere. You can access them. So they have a very smart video media strategy, I think, based on the what the Pashtuns have managed to achieve. And also, now, after all, these are all educated middle class Baloch. They're not the old world tribal leaders, believe in the traditional manner of protesting or fighting. This is a really tech savvy generation.
Yeah. Let's talk
And
about
that's why they've been
Marang.
so effective. Yeah.
Let's talk about Dr. Marang Baloch, sir. I quite enamored by the lady. She's got a powerful voice. She's not nobody has clicked her in the wrong side in such a big, sort of a rally that you have. You always have media gaffes. कुछ ना कुछ गड़बड़ हो ही जाती है. Something or the other is there. Even your own people click some wrong side of you. That's part of the game. There was nothing of the sort. She's got her image and her narrative pretty well set on her shoulder. How do you think that fares for a place where probably a year ago both of us would have said Balochistan doesn't have the populace and they don't have a leader? How does that
See,
fit in today?
this is, I mean, the people who have studied leadership, big events throw up leaders.
Yep.
In this case, the constant killing of Baloch youth, fathers, brothers, sons, ultimately the dam burst. And somebody had to come to the fore. 4 or 5 years earlier, there was a voice of missing Baloch people, and there was Mama Kadir.
Mm.
Now, Mama Kadir was not that effective a communicator as Mahrang Baloch is.
She's
She's a woman.
fantastic.
She
Yeah.
is, yeah, she's very feisty. And the greatest thing about her is the sincerity in her voice. If you listen to her, she's at times half crying, half serious, trying to smile. So you can make out the pain and the anguish which she represents. And when she talks, everybody else can relate to what she's saying because she's narrating their story. You
Mm.
know, she is articulating, putting into words what each one of them has felt. Because she herself, her father was abducted, tortured, and his body turned up. Then her brother was taken away. Luckily, he was released after 3 months. So she knows the pain. She knows the anguish. So I think it is that sincerity which has struck a chord among the Baloch and the people who watch Balochistan all over the world. So, this is what grassroots leadership is about. She's not imposed. She's not a tribal lady. She doesn't have a huge background. They come from a pretty humble circumstances. But the cause is so important and strong, and she is such a strong person. And she
Yep.
said in one of her speeches, "Kitni lashein giraoge? How many people will you kill? The more you
That
kill, the
was.
more we're going to come out."
Yep.
Yeah. And that you can't scare us. Our people have been missing for 10 years, 12 years, 14 years. Wow, how else are you going to scare us? You see, earlier the fear was that if somebody went missing, the family was told that if you protest, we will torture him even more.
Hmm.
So he would keep quiet. Today that fear is gone. 14 saal se missing hai, whatever you've done your worst. Up, you can't scare us anymore. That's a huge change in Balochistan. And I think this lady has a lot to foster that change. To tell people there's no need to be afraid any longer. We cannot be scared that we are Baloch, we are self-respecting people, and we are not going to allow this to happen anymore. So that's what this is the kind of leadership which has done and turned the Baloch around.
Mm. What do you think about the much attacks? I mean, that was. I'm talking. I'm not saying because it's Pakistan, but as a group capturing a city, that was fantastic.
Yeah, and that's
It came out
also
of nowhere. They just took over. They had their media right again. They had the videos coming out. They had their flags up. They had patrolling happening. They spoke to the people there. Stay inside your houses. If there's any problems, get in touch with us. All that stuff they did. So they were very well planned.
and this was a massive operation. I mean, if you
Yeah.
see what some of the Baloch um, sites and Twitter handles are saying, this was a very major operation in the sense the number of people deployed, plus their two sites called Majid Brigade and the Special Operations Group, and so it was a very well coordinated, well thought out. And you're right, they held a small city for 2 days and then they withdrew. It's a
On their own
demonstration.
whim.
Yeah, they
On
withdrew
their
on their
own
own.
whim.
Yeah. And so this is a very major operation. Apart from the should put things which have been happening in other places, election commission office here, some politician over there, and so on and so forth. But this was a demonstrator that look, we have the capacity, we have the capability, we can do it at a time and place of our choosing. And this would be a very worrying factor. If you remember some months ago, in September and October, the Pashtun, the TTP had done the same thing in Chitral when they attacked those police posts in Chitral and held on to them for some time. A similar thing in March. So you can see small waves, which can coalesce, which can become bigger, and is putting the Pakistan army under pressure. In fact, there was an article yesterday or day before which I was reading. In January alone, there have been 93 attacks.
Hmm.
93
Yeah.
attacks in January, of which about 90 people have died.
90.
All of last year, I think the average was about 55 attacks a month. And suddenly now you find in January, a major spike. And both, and I think in Balochistan and KPK, I've shared it's almost similar. Maybe a little more in KPK and FATA if you add that together. But that's the number of attacks. Can you imagine 90 attacks in a month in any country? And a lot of them are targeting the security, the TTP especially targeting the security forces. So there have been on an average 44, I was just calculating, 44 killings of security forces out of the army, paramilitary, and police every month, month after month in the entire 2023. Now, I don't think so any army can take that level of attrition
Yeah.
domestically. It's not a war. 44 people dying every month, killing, let alone the number of uh, people injured would be even much more. So that is the kind of action that the army.
जाने से पहले मैं 1 मिनट के लिए आपको रोक लूं, तो प्लीज ये चैनल को लाइक जरूर करिएगा, सब्सक्राइब करिएगा, और हाँ, हमारे जो मेन चैनल को जरूर जरूर अपनी फॉलोशिप दीजिए, ताकि हम आपको अच्छे अच्छे पॉडकास्ट, इंपॉर्टेंट सब्जेक्ट्स एंड जियोपॉलिटिकल अपडेट से आपके सामने प्रेजेंट करते रहें इसी तरह से। थैंक यू सो मच। जय हिंद, जय भारत।